The holiday season is upon us, and with the holidays comes the Magic Online Vintage Cube. Vintage Cube is coming back to Magic the Gathering Online next week, and with it come card changes that I will be covering in this video. The 42 cards that are leaving and coming in are going to have a significant impact on different deck archetypes and strategies for the cube. Before we jump into individual cards, I'd like to talk about something that Magic Online is doing for players for free. It's uncommon for Wizards or Magic Online to do something for the player base for free, but they're offering two free quote unquote practice drafts if you enter the code 2025 holidays into the Magic Online shop. This will allow you to play the cube twice without spending any money, but there won't be any prizes other than avatars you can unlock. This is a good way to practice the cube as well as just play to have fun. I enjoy cubing for fun, and this is something I will definitely be taking advantage of. If you take nothing else from this video, make sure that you use code 2025 holidays on Magic Online to be able to play this cube for free. Now, let's get into the card changes. We will be going in Wooburg order with some other cards coming in and out here and there, but to start, we are removing 3 of the white payoffs. These 3 white cards all cost 3 or more and are top ends for your aggro white decks. Elspeth, Cosmogrand Zenith, and Virtue of Loyalty will all be leaving the cube. These cards don't have specific synergies with other cards, they're just a top end for your white decks, so make sure that you're not looking out for them. A white card with some synergies that is leaving is going to be Static Prison. Static Prison is a removal spell that involves energy, and leaving with it is Amped Raptor, which is a aggro creature that involves energy. In talking about the reason for the removal of these cards, the Magic Online team said that they were trying to power down red-white aggro. They are not specifically trying to remove energy as a strategy, but these cards are being taken out simply because the archetype they deemed to be too strong. Guide of Souls is remaining in the cube as now the only card that involves energy. The last white card that is leaving the cube is Thalia. I don't understand the exact reason for the removal of this card. I think it's an interesting stacks piece and good in your white aggro strategies. As I said, the Magic Online team said they were trying to power down white aggro, so that is probably the reason for this exclusion. This card no longer being in the cube makes non-creature combo decks a little bit stronger, but it shouldn't be too big of an impact overall. Now for the cards coming into the cube. The first is Abandoned Air Temple out of Avatar. It enters tapped unless you control a basic land, which shouldn't be too hard to do. Then you can pay 4 and tap it to put a 1/1 counter on each creature you control. This is a nice non-basic land for any white decks that are creature go wide, which most white decks tend to be. There is very little opportunity cost in playing this card, and I think it is a good substitute for Virtue of Loyalty. Moving on to the next white card they're adding, it is Ranger Captain of Eos. They mentioned that in recent years, Ranger Captain has gotten a bump as more and more one-cost creatures have been added that are extremely viable. You have to build around Ranger Captain of Eos to include it in your deck. Great targets in white include Guide of Souls, Ocelot Pride, and Esper Sentinel. There are very strong targets outside of white, including Ragavan, Dragon Rage Channeler, Mockingbird, and more. Make sure you draft at least 2 or 3 of these if you want to play Ranger Captain of Eos in your deck. Overall, I think this is a good mid-range threat and a good substitution for the cube. The next white card coming in is Samwise the Stout-Hearted. It's a 2-mana 2/1 with Flash, and when it enters, you choose a permanent that was put into your graveyard from the battlefield this turn and return it to your hand. This works particularly well with fetch lands. You can crack a fetch land, flash in Samwise, and get the land back to your hand, which is just card advantage. It's also good with any small creatures that may be dying. It's good with Mishra's Bauble, and it's good just generically as a 2-mana flash threat. Overall, Samwise is a fun build-around card if you haven't used it yet that I think will be interesting in white builds. The last couple of white cards that they're bringing in are Appa and Guardian Scale Lord. These are the new white top-end cards that they're going to have us playing instead of Elspeth. Appa is a flash flying threat that comes in and airbends any number of target permanents you control, and it says whenever you cast a spell from exile, create a 1/1 ally creature token. This card is kind of similar to Archangel Avacyn, where it can flash its way in and kind of save some of your creatures. Reusing ETBs is very interesting, and just saving a creature from a removal spell is very good. It's also just a 3/4 flying threat with flash. Guardian Scale Lord has never been a card that I particularly like. It's a 5-mana 3/4 flying with backup 1, And it says whenever this creature attacks, return target non-land permanent with mana value X or less from your graveyard, where X is this creature's power. So for 5 mana, you can play it, put a counter on, say, a 3/3, attack for 4, and get something back. Then, on every subsequent turn, you can attack for 3 in the air and get something small back as well. It reads a lot like Sun Titan, but for some reason, I just don't like it as much. I will, however, be giving it a shot in my white decks, and I am more than happy to be proven wrong. The last card substitution I want to talk about in white is the exchange of Sunbillow Verge for Elegant Parlor. The Magic Online devs said that they substituted out Parlor for Verge because they thought that Red White wanted more untapped sources, but they are going back on this decision because Red White is something they think is too powerful, and having an unbalanced set of surveil lands isn't something that they like. So this is a very small change, but one that they're making. Moving on to blue, they're taking out Plagan, Lord of the Beach. I have thought this card is bad in the Vintage Cube since it got added, and apparently the Magic Online devs agree. So this card is leaving. Another more interesting card that's leaving, in my opinion, is Duelist of the Mind. Duelist of the Mind's power is equal to the number of cards you've drawn this turn, and whenever you commit a crime, you may draw a card and discard a card. As we'll get to a little later, something the Magic devs are really pushing with this update is discard synergies and graveyard synergies, both of which Duelist of the Mind works well with. Duelist of the Mind also works extremely well with wheel effects like Time Twister or Wheel of Fortune because you can make its power 8 and then get in for a huge chunk of damage in the air. I think this is an interesting card to take out, but it seems like they just wanted to make room for some new avatar cards, and they had to find something to cut somewhere. If you're playing the wheel strategy, or if you're playing some kind of blue-black reanimator deck, do not be looking out for Duelist of the Mind. It is no longer in the queue. This one made me pretty sad. Sadly, Cryptic Command is no longer on the power level that Vintage Cube is on. It is a staple counterspell, draw spell, bounce spell, tap spell that's been around for a very long time, but it is no longer at the power level needed to have a spot in Vintage Cube. Another substitution that they're making in blue with looting effects is they're taking out Kitsa Otterball Elite and bringing in Katara Waterbending Master. These cards do not play exactly the same, but both are able to loot, and both are 2 mana 1/3s. I think this change makes a lot of sense. People have not been using Kitsa for their copy effect very much in Vintage Cube, but Katara has the upside ability of being able to draw you more than one card and then discard. I think Katara will play well, and it's from the new set. This change makes a lot of sense. Get Katara in your decks that want to discard and loot. They're bringing in all sorts of blue birds with this update, both versions of Washing Tong and also Mockingbird. Washi Tong All Knowing is a 5 mana 4/4 with flying that when it enters puts target non land permanent an opponent controls on the top of its library, second from the top or the bottom. And it says whenever one or more cards are put into a library from anywhere, make 2 1/1 spirits with this spirit can't be blocked by non spirit creatures. On the floor, it removes something, is a 4/4 flyer, and gives you 2 1/1s that can't be blocked. Then, if you're able to put more spells or cards into libraries, either with Time Twister effects or with other similar bounce spells, you'll get more bodies to attack with. A nice blue controlling top end threat. Mockingbird, I mentioned as a good target for Ranger Captain of Eos, but it enters as a copy of any creature that costs equal to or less than the amount of mana you paid into it, including the one blue. So if you were to have X equals 0, you could copy a Ragavan, and it would have flying. Very versatile clone effect that's been seeing play in many formats. I think this is a great addition to the cube. Washington Librarian has been being dabbled with in Modern. It is a 2 mana 1/1 flash flying. You may also pay X, and when you do, Washington will enter with X 1/1 counters, and you will draw half of X cards rounded down. Very important effect. Whenever an opponent searches their library for any reason, including fetch lands, you put a counter on it and draw a card. This card is more powerful when your opponents are playing fetch lands, but even outside of that, a 4 mana 3/3 flyer that draws a card is no laughing matter. I think this will be an interesting card in your blue decks and one to look out for. I like all three of these additions, and they will be in many of the blue decks that I draft. Moving on to blue, they're taking out Brain Surge. This is clearly because they want to make more room for cards. I don't think this card is bad. I don't think this card is great. It is just no longer going to be in the queue. A card that I do think is bad that they're taking out is Spectral Restitching. It is one blue and X instant to flicker X target artifacts or creatures. There wasn't enough synergy to be building around this, especially since they took out Ephemerate. Just not worth doing in Vintage Cube, so they took it out. Moving on to black, this is a card I'm pretty sad to see go. Soren of House Markov is leaving the cube for no real reason. Again, they're just trying to make room for the new avatar cards, which I do understand. But this was a very good 2 mana threat with the life gain, and the Planeswalker version was very good, but it will no longer be in the cube. Biggest change for black is that they are taking out the entire Chain of Smog combo from the cube. This was first introduced in the No Bars Held cube all the way back in 2024. They then let it ride into the normal cube in 2024, and it's been a part of the Vintage Cube ever since. Now, though, they are removing it from the normal Vintage Cube. So that is Witherbloom Apprentice, Sedgemoor Witch, Pillage the Bog, and Chain of Smog. The Chain of Smog combo is one that I liked, especially in my Dark Depths decks, but this is no longer something that's going to be possible. They did not add a new combo, but they did re-add Damnation to the cube, as well as adding Fire Nation Occupation, which is a card I am extremely excited about drafting around. Fire Nation Occupation is a 3-mana enchantment that says when this enchantment enters, create a 2/2 red soldier creature token with Firebending 1. The exciting text is whenever you cast a spell during an opponent's turn, create a 2/2 red soldier creature token with Firebending 1. In your blue-black control decks, you can play this, cast a couple counterspells on your opponent's turn, and accrue a board of 2/2s with upside. I think this will be an extremely fun build-around card, and again, one I'm excited to draft. Moving on to red, a card that's leaving is Galvanic Blast. I was a little confused when they added this, but they're taking it out. It is mainly just a shock. Then, if you're in artifacts, it can be 4 damage to any target. The artifact decks weren't exactly looking for a red way to deal 4 damage, so this card did not stay long in the cube. A substitution in card that leads into a substitution of playstyle is Slick Shot Show Off being replaced with Cam and Ferric Havoc Duo. Instead of Spellslinger, they're pushing us towards discard. Cam and Ferric says it's a 1/2 flying haste for 2 that whenever you discard a card, it gets +2/+0 until end of turn. So similar to the text on Slickshot Show Off, but instead of spellslinging, it's whenever you discard a card. Discarding a card is something that they really want us to be doing with this update. They're re-adding both Root Wallas as well as Marauding Mako and Grease Wrench Goblin. All of these cards have been in the cube at different times in the past, but all of them are extremely good payoffs for being a discard deck. The Root Wallas you can cast for free if you discard them. The Mako gets bigger for each card you discard, and the Grease Wrench Goblin is a Savannah Lions with upside of getting bigger and allowing you to discard some cards. More on the discard theme, they are replacing Dreadhorde Arcanist with Party Thrasher. Dreadhorde Arcanist lets you flash back instants and sorceries, so the spell slinging just like Slick Shot Show Off, whereas Party Thrasher has you discard cards to exile cards from the top of your library and be able to play them. More combo potential for discard decks. Red is having the most changes, and part of what they're doing is replacing their mid-range threats. So sadly, Goblin Rabblemaster is out. I love that card. Black Lotus into Rabblemaster on 1 is always fun, but that card is going to be out, as well as Kellen, Karizev, and Nia. All of these are kind of mid-rangey threats that get in for damage, as well as give you some card advantage in one way or another. In their place are more discard-based mid-range threats. Grim Lavamancer lets you exile the cards from your graveyard, maybe that you're discarding, to deal 2 to anything. Anger is a good card to discard. It gives all of your cards haste if you control a mountain and Anger is in your graveyard. Angie's Ravager has Madness, so you can cast it for cheap if you discard it. And whenever it attacks, you discard your hand and draw 3, which is extremely powerful. And Squee, in my opinion, is probably now the worst card in this cube. It's a 3-mana 1/1, and at the beginning of your upkeep, you may return it from your graveyard to your hand, which means if you're discarding it to any of your effects, you'll just get it back at the beginning of each upkeep. I think that that is not good enough, but we will see. With all these changes, it is pretty clear what they want us to do in this cube as far as red goes with discard, and it's something I'm excited to try out. The last red change is the card Chainsaw leaving. Chainsaw is not a card I thought was particularly powerful, but I did think it was particularly interesting with Stoneforge Mystic. It is a 2 mana equipment that comes in and deals 3 damage to a creature. Again, I don't think it was very good, but Stoneforge Mystic packages having a removal spell as a bailout was interesting, but it is no longer something you can do. Another fundamental change that they're making to the Vintage Cube is they are taking out the Berserk Invigorate type package. So all of the double the creature's power effects are leaving, as well as Invigorate and Rancor as ways to get the creature's power up. You will no longer be able to build an all in green Berserk deck. Additionally, they're taking out some of the landfall effects. The Harmonizer is getting on this screen as well, since it's the landfall to double the power, but with it are going Traveling Chocobo and Lotus Cobra. Both of these are landfall trigger cards. Lotus Cobra has been in the cube for a long time, in and out. It is out for now. I'm sure it will be back one day. It leads to very explosive starts, and I'm kind of sad to see these cards go. I think they're interesting and fun build arounds. Don't be holding your breath for Chocobo or Lotus Cobra in your green decks. Another card you're taking out that was a pretty recent addition is Legolas's Quick Reflexes. I thought this card was interesting and fun. It was a protection spell and a kill spell with split second, which is always interesting. Very unique card in any color, but especially in green. But they're taking it out. They said it didn't see enough play, and I believe that. And again, they're just always trying to make room for the new cards. A couple real mainstay green threats are getting removed: Primeval Titan and Ovenwald Oddity. Primeval Titan is interesting. I usually have it as a backup natural order target. It's a good thing to ramp into and gets you ahead. I'll get to it, but they're also taking out Field of the Dead, which is something that you could do with Primeval Titan. I guess taking out one makes the other a little less good, so they're taking out both. Then Ovenwald Oddity being removed is something I disagree with. I think if you would take out this card or Questing Beast, you should take out Questing Beast. I've won many, many games by flipping Ovenwald Oddity. I've never flipped a Questing Beast. So they're just removing the green, aggro, mid range. I say aggro, both these cards cost at least 4, but these higher end attacking, trampling threats are both being removed. Last green card being removed is Kren, 2 mana 1/2 that puts a counter on 2 creatures, so itself and another one. It was fine, but I never played it in any of my decks, and according to the Magic Online devs, no one really did. But the king is back. Tarmogoyf has returned to its full form, and as we'll get to in a second, I think that they are wanting us to really power up our graveyards in green. Tarmogoyf will be a very real threat in this vintage cube. To no one's surprise, Badger Mole Cub from Avatar is being added to this cube. It is one of the most potent threats in Standard and Modern right now. It powers up all of your mana dorks and brings an earthbended land with it. It will make your green ramp out big threat decks even better. The green mana threat they're bringing in to replace Ovenwald Oddity is the Scouring Storm Soul, which I always just think of as Sandman, which is what it is in paper. Its power and toughness is equal to the number of lands you control, so at least 3, probably mid to late game, closer to 5 or 6. It can't be blocked by small creatures, and you can pay 5 and return it and a land card from your graveyard to the battlefield tapped. So it's recursive in itself, and if you mill it over, you can bring it back with a land like a fetch land or a wasteland or any of those things. I think this card will be interesting, but I think it will be a little bit below the bar. Cards they're bringing in green, I'm quite excited about both of these. Town Greeter and Satyr Wayfinder are both 2 mana 1/1s that mill 4 and have you put a land from among them into your hand. With Town Greeter, if you happen to mill over starting town and put it in your hand, you will gain 2 life, but that will probably not come up. Both of these are cards that are just better than the sum of their parts. You can put them in your Reanimator decks to mill over some stuff. You can put them in your flashback decks to be able to flash things back, put them in your storm decks, put them in your blue decks with Echo, Vions, all sorts of different things you can do, and they will hopefully get you your land that you will be able to have better fixing and stay on curve. Moving on to ways that green can interact with the graveyard, they're bringing back in Survival of the Fittest. I think people in Cube do not play Survival of the Fittest correctly. A lot of the times they just discard their dorks for 5/5s and think that's all it can do. It can do many more things. For example, it is a 2 mana Entomb. If you have a creature in your deck that you would like to be in your graveyard, you can discard a small creature, go get the creature you want in your graveyard, discard the creature you want in your graveyard, go get a real creature, then reanimate the big thing from your graveyard. Also, with all of these madness cards being added, Root Wallow, for example, you can discard it and cast it, and there are countless other synergies that you can find with Survival of the Fittest. Look out for it. Speaking of cards you might want in your graveyard in green, Vengevine and Hogak are both being added. Vengevine is a 4 mana 4/3 with haste, but you usually will not be casting it. It says whenever you cast a spell, if it's the second creature you've cast this turn, you may return Vengevine from your graveyard to the battlefield. So, if you were to cast a Satyr Wayfinder, mill this over, then cast a Basking Root Wallow, you'd get the Vengevine from your graveyard onto the battlefield for free. Very good. It'll be interesting to see if there is enough support for it. A more powerful card that's being added is Hogak. Hogak is a 7 mana 8/8 where you can't spend mana to cast the spell, but it has Convoke and Delve. So you have to tap at least 2 creatures to pay for the green pips, and either tap more creatures or exile 5 cards from your graveyard in order to cast it. It's an 8/8 for trample, and it says you may cast it from your graveyard. So again, with the Town Greeter and the Satyr Wayfinder, you'll be milling yourself over and hopefully be able to cast this from your yard by tapping them. I think both of these cards are very fun build-arounds and something interesting for green to be doing. Although they're taking out some landfall cards, they've added Saz's Chocobo and Earthbender Ascension. The Chocobo is a 1 mana 0/1 that says whenever a land you control enters, put a 1/1 counter on this creature. So, in theory, you could go Mox Emerald, play it, play a fetch land, have a 2/3. On the following turn, play a fetch land, attack for 4 on turn 2. That seems pretty strong. However, if you draw it mid to late game, it's not very good. I think this card is pretty bad, but we will have to see how it works out. Earthbender Ascension is a 3 mana enchantment that says when it enters Earthbend 2, which is put 2 counters on a land, and the land becomes a creature. Then you may search your library for a land and put it onto the battlefield tapped, then shuffle. Then it says landfall. Whenever a land you control enters, put a counter on it. When this enchantment has 4 or more counters on it, whenever a land enters, put a 1/1 counter on target creature you control, it gains trample. I think it's very interesting that they're adding this card when they're removing the Traveling Chocobo and Lotus Cobra. I think this card is going to be below rate, but it is a 3 mana 2/2 on the floor that ramps you. Then eventually, mid to late game, you're going to be able to give creatures trample. I think it's more important than the counter to break a board stall. I think both of these cards are pretty below rate, but time will tell. The last card they're adding, I think, is a really weird one. Great Divide Guide is a 2 mana 2/3, and it says each land and ally you control has tap to add 1 mana of any color. I have done a count of how many allies are going to be in the cube, and the number is 2. This one and one other we haven't gotten to yet. So what this card really says is tap, add 1 mana of any color, and land you control have tap, add 1 mana of any color. So I guess it's a mana dork on the floor that fixes all your mana, but I don't know if that's good enough in Vintage Cube. We will see. On to multicolor, they're substituting Urtai for Basaim. I don't know if I pronounced either of those correctly. Urtai was a 4 mana 3/2 with flash that when it enters could counter a spell and have your opponent draw a card, or destroy a creature or planeswalker and have your opponent draw a card. This was definitely a fine mid-range card that could keep you safe for a turn, but it's being replaced with a more interesting build-around. Basim is a 2 mana 2/2 that says whenever you cast a historic spell, draw a card, and it can't be blocked. And it says whenever it deals combat damage to a player, put a 1/1 counter on it. So it will draw you a card per turn in blue-black if you're playing enough legendary cards and artifacts, and it will slowly grow. Definitely a more powerful threat, better card draw, and better mid-range. I think this is a good substitution that I will look forward to playing with. A substitution that kind of makes me sad is Third Path Ironclast is being subbed out for Pinnacle Emissary. I think the Ironclast is definitely on Vintage Cube power level. Whenever you cast a non-creature spell, make a 1/1. But Pinnacle Emissary has been being very good in Modern and Vintage. You can warp it for 1, and it says whenever you cast an artifact, create a 1/1 drone that has flying and can only block creatures with flying. One of the really good things about the Ironclast is that the creatures that you make can prevent your opponent from attacking since they can just block super easy. Pinnacle Emissary doesn't let you block, but it can lead to much more explosive starts. You know, if you have 3 1/1 flyers on turn 1, you're going to have a hard time losing that game. I'll have to see how these cards play, but I'm a little sad to see the Ironclast go. The last multicolor card they're taking out is Unruly Krasis. This is just another green threat creature. It's a 4/4 trample for 3 that you can adapt and make bigger. They're removing it. It wasn't seeing a lot of play. Blue green decks, this is not exactly what they were trying to do, so they're taking it out. As alluded to earlier, there's one more ally in the set, and that card is Aang Swift Savior. If you've ever played with Selfless Spirit, this card's a lot like that, but people say this one's better. It's a 3 mana 2/3 flash flying, and when it enters, you airbend up to one target creature or spell, which means you exile it, and it may be cast by paying 2 rather than its mana cost. So if your opponent's playing tapping out to play something, you can flash this in and make them pay 2 more to cast it again. If there's a creature in the way of an attack, you can airbend it out. If they're targeting your creature with a removal spell, you can airbend your own creature out. If you want to reuse an ETB, you can do that. Very versatile. Then it says Waterbend 8, you transform it. So Waterbend 8 means it's a combination, it's pretty much Convoke. So Convoke 8, you transform it into a 5/5 that says whenever it attacks, put a 1/1 counter on each creature you control. So that's just a very good way to top it out. Overall, this is a very good threat in your blue white decks. Good for tempo, good for control. Definitely look out to draft some Aang. Last collection of cards that they tossed in for the discard themes. They got Bazaar of Baghdad back in, which is a vintage classic. Draw 2, then discard 3. It's probably at its best in Reanimator because you want your reanimation threats in your graveyard, and this can help you do that. But now, with all of the different discard sub themes that they have going on, Bazaar could see play in red black decks. We'll see. Speaking of red black madness payoffs, Desecrix is a 4 mana 4/3 with trample, and it says when it enters, return target creature card with mana value 3 or less from the graveyard to the battlefield. It attacks this turn, then at the end of turn, sacrifice it. Most importantly, it has Mayhem 2. Mayhem is pretty much Madness, so Madness 2. And you get a 4/3 that brings something back for a turn. So it's good. It is a lot of work, a lot of build around. We'll have to see if it is actually on the correct power level. Lastly, a card that I do think is going to be on the correct power level is Monument of Endurance. It's a 3 mana artifact, and whenever you discard a card, choose one that hasn't been chosen this turn. Either draw a card, make a treasure, or each opponent loses 3 life. If you have this and you activate Bazaar, you'll get to do all 3, which is pretty nice. I think Monument will be one of the more potent threats in this vintage cube. Last multicolored card to talk about is Master of Death. It's a 3 mana 3/1. When it comes in, you surveil 2. And then at the beginning of your upkeep, if it's in your graveyard, you may pay 1 life. If you do, return it to your hand. A lot like Squee, but it's in blue and black, and it has more relevant combat and ETB effects. That makes me think it's better than Squee, but very similar card coming back in for all of the graveyard and discard shenanigans. On to the final stretch, we're in colorless. Field of the Dead, as I mentioned, is leaving. It was not on the power level needed for vintage. You had to have 7 different lands, which was such a burden to draft around. And then it was such a small payoff for such a large investment. You have to kind of build your whole deck around it, wait until turn 7, and then you'd be getting a couple 2/2s. By then, you're dead in vintage. So they took it out. Mirror Battlesphere has also been taken out. 7 mana 4/7 that makes a bunch of mirrors. They said that they liked it as a secondary Tinker target, but now between Portal and Blightsteel Colossus and the Endstone, that you just don't need it as a secondary Tinker target anymore. Lastly, a card that I think is funny that they're taking out is Ghost Vacuum. And the reason they gave is because they want people to do more things with their graveyard. Ghost Vacuum is extremely good at removing cards from graveyards, and it's a late game threat that any deck can play. But since they're pushing the discard sub theme so much, and in green, the Vengevine Hogak combo, they're removing Ghost Vacuum just so less decks have access to Graveyard Hate, which is something I think is pretty funny. But don't hold your breath for Ghost Vacuum with your Urza Sagas. And finally, we're on to the last change that's being made. The Palantir of Orthanc is being added. This card is great. You scry 2 and then mill some cards, and your opponent takes some life, or you draw some cards. Pretty much what it says is 3 mana. For the next 2 turns, your opponent's going to take 6 damage. Then every turn after that, you're going to draw an additional card. So that's really good. Gets you some card advantage in colorless, or, obviously any color. But a card that I think is fun, and I'm happy to see back. But there you have it. Those are the updates being made to the Vintage Cube for this December season. Let me know which of these cards you're happy to see in, sad to see go, or any combos you think that I missed talking about when I was talking about each of the cards individually. And of course, do not forget to use the code 2025 holidays to be able to play 2 Vintage Cube drafts for free with no prizes on the line, but it's always still fun to play. So, as always, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.